Hello everyone. So today we will be discussing about lifting the corporate veil. The other day I discussed with you all about a very important characteristic of separate legal entity. So that is that it meant that company is a separate person in the eyes of law. It is an artificial legal person. However, due to this characteristic of company, a person could have been benefited in some or the other way by conducting certain fraud. So, when the notion of legal entity is used to defeat the public convenience or justify the wrong or protect the fraud or defend the crime, the law will not regard company as a corporate entity, and it shall pay regards to the economic realities behind the legal facade. That is, in case a certain fraud is being committed and the notion of separate legal entity is being used to protect themselves from that particular fraud, the court shall lift this corporate veil and shall find out the real culprits behind such fraud, and they shall be entitled to punishment according to law. So there are two types of situations when this corporate veil can be lifted. First is common law exceptions and other is statutory. In this video, I will be discussing only common law exceptions, that is, which are according to enforcement by our judicial system. First one, determination of a character. A company is not a natural person with mind or conscience, but it may assume when persons in effective control of its affairs are residents in an enemy country, or whenever residents are acting under direction and control of the enemies, then it may assume to be having a character of that particular company. Now, this argument is supported by a very famous case, that is Daimler Company Limited versus Continental Tire and Rubber Company Limited. So facts of the case are, C, a private company, was incorporated in England for the purpose of selling motor tires manufactured in Germany by German company. The German company held bulk of the shares in the company C, and all the directors were German residents. So during the First World War, C commenced an action to recover a trade debt. The House of Lords held that C was an enemy company for the purpose of trading because its effective control was in the hands of enemy. Accordingly, company was debarred from maintaining the action. So as you see that during the World War, England and Germany were opponents, and since the company's major directors were German residents, the court gave company a characteristic of German citizen. Next is prevention of fraud or improper conduct. Now, what is this? In case a certain fraud is being conducted by the substantial members of the company and the veil of separate legal entity is being used for that particular protection of that conduct or that fraud, then the court shall lift this corporate veil. The case to support this argument is Guilford Motor Company Limited versus Horn. So H entered into an agreement with the employer that after the termination of employment, he would not solicit his employer's customer for a certain period of time. Soon after the termination, he formed another company of which two shareholders were his wife and one another person. The company sent out circulars to the customers of his former employer. An injunction was granted against Horn and against the company he has formed, restraining them from soliciting plaintiff's customers. The court held that company was mere a cloak for the purpose of enabling the defendant to commit a breach of his agreement against solicitation. So what is it, class? There was a one-person H. He was working under certain company. He entered into an agreement that once I leave this company, I would not start any sort of business in which will, of course, reduce the customers of his former employer. However, after his termination, he formed a company, making his wife and one other person the member. So when they started interacting or started reaching out to the employees or customers of the previous employer, he was liable to pay for certain damages, when the court said that it was just in order to attract the customers, or just in order to just in order to flourish his own business, he broke a contract with his former employer. Next is when a company acts as an agent of shareholders. I'll give you just an example of it. An English company was formed with capital of 100 in 1 shares. 90 shares were held by the director of United States Film Company and 10 by another director who was a British subject. A film called Monsoon was produced by the company by financing the production. The court refused to agree that film was made by British company because it was just acting as an agent of the American film company, which held most of the shares. Next is punishment for contempt of court. Now the person who is responsible for contempt of the court, then he will have to be punished, not the company. He cannot take the support from the principle of separate legal entity. Another is ascertaining the true nature of transaction if alleged sham. The court is going to lift the corporate veil to ascertain that whatever transaction has been committed, as to who are the real parties for commitment of this transaction, and whether it is genuinely in the name of the company or in the name of the persons who have entered into that transaction. Another is avoidance of welfare legislation. An example to it is a subsidiary was formed to split the profit so that the incidence of bonus in the hands of the parent company will be reduced. Supreme Court disregarded the existence of separate company for the purpose of working out a bonus for its employees. Now what is it? There was certain company, it formed another company, it formed a subsidiary just in order to split the profit so that the bonus should not be given to the employees, in order to reduce its profit. So the Supreme Court said it was just to avoid the welfare of the employees, just in order to split the profits, they had formed a subsidiary, hence it is wrong, hence the corporate veil was lifted. Next we come to where a company is itself a sham. Now when a company is a sham, the court is going to lift the corporate veil where a company is sham. That is where the device of incorporation is used for certain improper purpose. Where a person borrowed a money from a company and it invested it into 3 different companies, all of which he and his son were the only members. The lending company was permitted to attach the assets of all the 3 companies as they were created to hook wink the lending company. Now what is this? They say there was one person, he invested in 3 different companies, of which he himself and his son were the only members. So the lending company was permitted to attach, the lending company, according to court, had to attach the assets of all of the company, all of the 3 companies together in order to pay off the tax liability. Another one is determination of technical competency of the company. Technical competency of the company is whether the company is competent enough to be technically sound for certain big investment. If a company has been investing in certain purposes, whether it is permitted, whether it has been properly registered under the name of the law. Then is formation of the subsidiary company to act as an agent. The concept of lifting the corporate veil is a changing concept. It will be lifted for the benefit of the company too, not only for the benefit of the members associated. So the Supreme Court in one of its recent decisions said that where the holding company has 100% shares in subsidiary company, the latter is created only for the purpose of the holding company, corporate veil can be lifted. That is, if there is one holding company which has 100% shares in the subsidiary company, is there a difference between the 2 companies? Absolutely not. So here also the corporate veil is lifted. So thank you so much class. In the next video, I will be discussing statutory exceptions when the corporate veil can be lifted, or statutory exceptions to the principle of separate legal entity. Thank you.